You done now?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Back to the Future, the podcast, the only podcast looking back in time at the greatest film trilogy of all time, Back to the Future. I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore, and wow, man, do we have a show for you today? This is something that I've wanted to do since we started Back to the Future, the podcast, all the way back in 2015, and I know I've had somewhat of a hiatus here in Season 5, but I've been busy, man, but this is something that I am really looking forward to. We are going to do a commentary. I'm going to do a commentary, and you're going to listen, hopefully, of Back to the Future Part 1. Now, I'm going to start this movie here momentarily, and the way it's going to work is I'm going to have my remote in hand. We're going to watch all 1 hour and 56 minutes of this marvelous film, and I'm just going to comment on it while it's going on. Sometimes I might be silent. Sometimes I might be talking nonstop and incessantly like I tend to do. But I'm just going to point out things that I've always looked at with this film, interesting things that I've always found out, or little tidbits of stuff that you might not already know. Now, if you're a Back to the Future fan like me, I'm sure you know a lot of the little behind-the-scene things when they come up. But I still want to point them out because this movie has so many cool little things about it. And I have someone coming on who wrote the encyclopedia, essentially, of Back to the Future. So I'm looking forward to having that on so we can talk a little bit even more in depth than I already am going to today on the show. But here we go. So what I'm going to do is I have it pulled up here, and I'm going to do a little countdown. And once I hit play, that's when you can sync it up. This is what I want you to do. Throw this podcast on if you have a wireless speaker, Bluetooth speaker, if you want to do it with your headphones, if you want to play it off your phone, whatever you want to do. When I hit play, I want y'all to hit play on the movie as well, so we can watch this as a family, as the McFly family in 1985. So if y'all are ready to do this, I am locked in. I've got my water. I've got a ginger ale. I'm ready to get this thing going. All right, so I'm going to start here in 3, 2, 1. I'm hitting play. Watching through Cinemax. It's loading right now, and here we go. Here we are. Back to the Future, Part 1. Maybe, oh, by the way, it's PG for mild violence, adult content, and adult language. I first saw Back to the Future on the Disney Channel, if you can believe that. And I was probably, 7 or 8 years old when I first saw the movie. I was born in 92. The movie came out in 85, as you'll know. So I was, 7? So it had been 14 years about since the movie had come out before I saw it. Steven Spielberg presents a Robert Zemeckis film. And I'm just kind of surprised on, oh man, I love the title sequence here. I'm just surprised that they had that on the Disney Channel. Now here we go into the iconic opening shot, which is all one cut, one take. If you listen to Back to the Future, the podcast, Season 1, we had Kevin Pike on. And Kevin Pike kind of discussed how they shot this scene. He was the special effects supervisor on the first movie. And just all the clocks. And there's Harold Lloyd hanging from a clock, which was a foreshadowing of what's going to come in the climax of the movie. Harold Lloyd, no relation to Christopher. He was in the iconic film Safety Last, where he was seen, much like Doc Brown is, hanging off of a clock. And the exposition in this opening shot, the Hill Valley Telegraph, saying Brown Mansion destroyed from a fire. You see Benjamin Franklin there. There's Einstein, it looks like. Edison. And this is where we start to hear the Toyota commercial. This shot was so good. And I know that when we get to the point where we see the dog food, which is about to come up here, they had to reshoot that because they had a different brand of dog food. And here comes the exposition about the this is the plutonium scene. When I was a kid, I also always loved the Rube Goldberg of this opening shot, right? You know, the Rube Goldberg machines were always kind of my favorite. And although this one had a practical purpose, this was to feed his dog and make breakfast. And here comes the cow can dog food. So yeah, what I was saying is they had a different dog food that they had built the machine for initially. And they understood how it plopped out and everything. And then cow can came in at the last second. And they had to heat it up with like a flame underneath the can before it opened up and poured out because they couldn't get it to flop. And here we go. Marty McFly, the iconic Nikes. I still don't think we've seen a cut yet either. Boom. Skateboard hits the plutonium. Handle with care. One thing I never understood, and I made music a lot, but I never got why the rockers, because I was never a rocker, but why did you have to turn it all the way up to overdrive? All the way to 100. Primary power, over range. It's about 1.21 gigawatts is what he's turning it up to. He's going to play the world's smallest guitar. A yellow guitar. That looks like the 80s. It looks like the 80s, but it looks like the 50s. Which I guess is appropriate for this movie. One of the things I also used to think about when I've seen this movie, this is probably my 100th time watching Back to the Future, is what was the purpose of the speaker? Oh. What was the purpose of Doc Brown's speaker? I don't know. Does anyone know out there? Tweet me at Brad Gilmore. Why did he have the speaker? I know if you see the, was it IDF comics or IDW comics that Bob Gale is doing right now in the Back to the Future series, he explains why Marty and Doc met and had to do with, the guitar aspect, the rock aspect. He had the speaker. But what was Doc Brown's purpose for the speaker? It couldn't be to lure 17-year-old boys to his lab. That would be very troubling for many reasons. Look at that house, though. That house looks like the 1950s. It has a jukebox in it. All these old school clocks. The cat clock that we saw that we're actually going to see again later on in the movie. Wow. By the way, I just realized that. The clock that he was hanging above his toilet, wasn't that the cat clock that we saw in the opening scene? I might be wrong, but we'll get to that. He's late for school. Oh. My friend Matt Topolsky, who was on this podcast, I think we talked about it. He got to go see Huey Lewis in the News live. And everybody was waiting for Back in Time and The Power of Love. And here comes Power of Love. I think that there was reports in the 80s that a lot of kids were doing this, what Marty's doing right now, holding on to the back of cars on their skateboards. All right, Marty, holler, brother. And some of them got hurt. I think they had to do like PSAs, like this is not okay to do. Brother in the Mountain Dew hat just sees somebody holding onto the back of his car and he's okay with it. I also have a question. Why does every school have to look like a prison? Oh, Claudia Wells here, who's been on the podcast a couple times. I'm telling you, man, with all due respect, Claudia Wells, 1985 Claudia Wells, she's a real Hall of Famer. Man, Strickland was such a jerk. I wonder what his beef was with Doc Brown. You know, he said he's a real nutcase. Yo, man, Strickland is a dick. And here's the Huey Lewis cameo. Some reject band. And now here are the Pinheads. I wonder what Strickland's beef was with Doc Brown. He said he was nuts. He's a real nutcase, McFly. I wonder what Doc's reputation really was in 1985. Was he... There's Claudia Wells again, just looking good. Was Doc Brown known as kind of like the town weirdo? In the street that I was growing up as a kid, there was somebody on the end of the street who had all of his windows boarded up with they're like black plywood. His name was Hal. I don't know if Hal is still with us, but he was kind of like everyone in the neighborhood knew, you know, Hal's a little off. So I wonder if that's what Doc's reputation was at the time. Like, you don't want to mess with Doc. Now, I don't know if this was the case, but on that re-elect Goldie Wilson van, it looked like one of his teeth were colored in gold. Somebody tweet me about that too. This right here too was also the one thing in the movie that never got picked up on. Everything else has been really good about it. If they drop a line, it's going to pay off later in the film. When Jennifer tells Marty, you need to send this demo tape into the record company, you're really good. That's the one thing that we never hear about again. We never hear about the demo tape in the record company. I wouldn't say I'm still working on it, but I had an idea for a spec script of Back to the Future 4. There's a little fan fiction I was writing. And my theory, and no one steal this, was that Marty actually sends that tape into the record company shortly after he gets back from 1955. And the Pinheads, with the power of love, have a national hit, worldwide hit with their one-hit wonders. If I was Marty's mother, I'd be much more worried that he was going camping with the guys other than a sleepover with his girlfriend. Just throwing that out there. There's a really good, cool dude on eBay. There's a guy on eBay who's selling props from Back to the Future that he creates. And I have a Save the Clock Tower can. It looks identical. I'll post a picture on my Twitter. Jennifer's dad looks like a real dick, too. Jennifer. And here she comes. She's going to write 555, whatever, 1043, and I love you. And she kisses him right in front of her pops. If I'm pops, I'm not okay with this. 555 4823. Beautiful handwriting. She wrote that too fast and not on a flat surface for it to look that good. It must have taken Marty a really long time to get home. He grabs that police car to leave, and it's still daylight, like right after school. Now it's like nighttime almost, or I guess it's dusk. Traveling by skateboard isn't the most time efficient. You know, this movie has phenomenal acting throughout. That little thing right there next to Marty's shoulder looks like Groot. Yo, that is Groot. Guys, go right to where Marty is looking at Doc. If you're watching this with me, did that look like Groot, that statue right above Marty's right shoulder? Right there. Is that Groot? I was going to say, though, in a movie with phenomenal acting, everybody in this movie does so well at their role, but I don't know if anyone acts better or puts on a better performance than Crispin Glover. I know that movie, The Irishman, is coming out with De Niro, Pesci, and Pacino, where Scorsese's de-aging them. It's like a $150 million movie or something, or a $250 million movie. I thought that's what they did in Back to the Future. I thought that Biff, George, Lorraine, I thought those were their real ages when we see them in 85, and then they just de-aged them with some movie magic. Obviously, I was a kid and an idiot. Now, there's about to be a cut scene, a scene that was cut out of the movie here that we talked about in future, past episodes of the show when me and Norman Binford, where George McFly is going to buy peanut brittle because he just can't say no to anybody. He can't stand up for himself. And that was cut out. I guess one of his coworkers, one of George McFly's coworkers, show up at the doorstep with his little girl selling peanut brittle, and there it is right there. And that's why Marty right here is staring at the peanut brittle like, damn you, Dad, you can't stand up for yourself. Mark McClure, also in the Superman movies. I've wanted to get Mark McClure on this show for so long, and I cannot find any contact information for him. Boom. It's a beautiful cake. Even though Lorraine's an alcoholic here, she was pretty good at her artisanship for her bakery or for her baking. Oh, God, Crispin Glover, man. No, she's asking for the business is what she's asking for. Now, that was always a weird moment for me when I look at it now, is when she's like, I never sat in a parked car with a boy. She seemed to hesitate as if she knew she was lying. And I know the space-time continuum does funny things, but Marty hadn't gone back yet. So therefore, she hadn't met Calvin Klein yet. Therefore, she wasn't parked in a car with a boy yet. So I think this must have been when the Bobs first kind of thought about Lorraine McFly. They said, what if you went back to high school and your mom was like the school slut? That was their words, not mine. And I wonder if that kind of dialogue right there was her lying to herself and to her children about her previous activities. I wonder what's a darker performance, too, for Lorraine, for Leah Thompson. This 1985 Lorraine or the 1985 Biff horrific period in Back to the Future 2. Both really dark characters, but this one has a dimming sense of optimism about her. She still loves George, even though everything else in her life isn't going the way she wants it to. What a great scene. She's like, I just wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. And then she had this look of total despair. So he forgot his video camera. Was Doc talking on a cell phone? How did he call Marty? I'm sorry if I'm asking all these questions out loud. There's the Twin Pine Mall shot, which we'll see change later. With the time is 1:16 a.m. But I'm sorry I'm asking all these questions out loud, but I'm noticing things as I'm just talking throughout the film. And how did he call Marty? Am I missing something? One of the best reveals in movie history. The Alan Silvestri score is perfect. And there it is, the DeLorean time machine. As y'all know, DeLorean Motor Company headquarters are here in Houston, right outside of Houston. I got to go down there. There's a video on YouTube of me touring the DeLorean factory. Wow, look at that. But they had a replica time machine inside of the DeLorean headquarters. And when I went recently to go pick up something from my peoples, what up, Sarah, over there at DeLorean, they had sold the time machine to somebody overseas. They sold the time machine for $88,000. Go figure. You know, it's funny. Christopher Lloyd always talks about that he almost turned this film down, that he didn't think that this is something he wanted to do and he wanted to become a stage actor or go back to stage acting. And I always thought that was weird because the same year this movie came out is the same year that Clue the movie came out. And I'm wondering, did he look at Clue the movie and say, oh, I got to do this? And then Back to the Future came up. He goes, what the hell is this crap? See, I'm surprised that was on Disney. Right now, backtothefuture.com. If you want to know more about the behind the scenes stuff, they are offering a $5 discount on the two documentaries that came out in 2015, Back in Time and Out of Time. We've had both of the directors of those films on this show, Steve Concatelli, Jason Aaron. Yeah, did Doc see Clue or did Chris Lloyd see Clue the movie and was like, yeah, this is the one. This is Back to the Future crap I don't know about. Some great old school special effects. Wow. Gone. Boom. I own that license plate too. Had to buy that. Be honest, guys, I see no cell phone on Doc. I still want to know how he made this phone call. I don't see any pay phones. It's a fair point, Doc. I also love the concept that they did where the DeLorean would leave hot and come back cold. And there's a lot of great behind the scenes information on how they would have to cool down the DeLorean. And if you look at it right in that shot, it looks icy, man. You can't even, well, the out of time plate's not there anymore because it fell off. That's right. Christopher Lloyd. I don't know. It's a toss up for me between Christopher Lloyd and Crispin Glover in this film. Although I think overall, the best Back to the Future actor is Thomas Wilson. They're those Nike Vandals that I own as well. I've bought too much memorabilia from this movie. And I have so much to go. Also, when I was a kid, Einstein Copernicus, that was the same dog. It was a shot of the iconic time circuits. Now, when he's inputting the destination times, what's interesting is none of these events occurred in Hill Valley. So he would be going to whatever was there, on the 4th of July or on the birth of Christ, whatever was in that arena or that area. It wouldn't be Hill Valley. So you'd just be going to some empty field, even before Peabody. Vision. Flux capacitor. Now, have they ever gone back into detail about what Doc's family did and how they had the family fortune? Because, you had the mansion, the Gamble house, which we'll get to in a minute. Dr. E. Brown Enterprises 24/7 scientific. What did the truck say? 24-hour scientific services. In like a food truck. Oh man, Chris Lloyd is the man. That's the real boy. Yeah. Those of you who follow me, you know that I work with Booker T, WCW, WWE Hall of Famer. And he tells a story about the first time that he and his brother, Stevie Ray, saw Ric Flair. It was in the old Houston Arena. And they were talking to this old wrestling veteran named Tiger something. Tiger Stevens or Tiger something. And Ric Flair walks in. He's wearing the alligator shoes, the $1 million suit, custom fit suit. Hair's perfectly combed and hair sprayed, the Rolex watch, the diamond rings. And Tiger turns to Booker and goes, "Hey, that's Ric Flair. That's the real boy there." So now I use that line all the time. Doc Brown, that's the real boy there. Funny that he wanted to go 25 years into the future. Funny how he has to start every sentence by saying funny. Marty's actually a little bit smarter, too, than people give him credit for. To know that plutonium at 17 was a nuclear thing, I didn't pay attention that much in chemistry. I don't think I would have picked up on that. They were going to go 25 years. Doc was going to go 25 years into the future instead of 30 like the round number was, you know? Because remember, they went 30 years in the past, then 30 years in the future, then 60 years back into the past, and then 100 years after that. So a lot of years traveled. Never 25, though. Never an increment of 25. This is the one part of the movie, too, that I don't know if it fully holds up. The Libyan terrorists are a little... it's a little dicey. Notice the bullets aren't making any impressions in the truck as they're hitting them. Just sparks are flying. I'm seriously noticing so much that I've never noticed before. Oh. So that's where they shoot Doc. Looks dead. And now Marty couldn't contain himself right there. Had to make his presence known. And this is just never a good move. To stand with your eyes closed in front of a terrorist group who are driving a VW van. What great timing that the van stopped working momentarily. Now, this is another fan criticism I always hear about the movie, but it's a small one. Like any critique you can give this movie is small because the movie is perfect. And so are the sequels. I don't care what Derek Harmon says. But the criticism here is Marty just learned that this thing can travel through time if you get to 88 miles per hour. He saw the demonstration. He saw it happen. And then he says, let's see if you bastards can do 90. Like you don't know what's going to happen. And it's a very good thing that the last date that Doc Brown entered into the time circuits was 1955. Because if Marty started to go back to the birth of Christ, I don't think we would have ever seen Marty again. That would have been a hard time coming back. A lot of screaming here as he goes into the Peabody barn through all the pine, old little farmhouse. The sets in Back to the Future, another thing, they're just all killer. No filler. And of course, many of you know the story of Sid Sheinberg, how he got the idea to name Back to the Future because he didn't like the name. He thought it doesn't make any sense. And this right here, where the kid shows an old man Peabody the comic Tales from Space, Space Zombies from Pluto. And this is where Sid Sheinberg got the idea that the perfect title for the movie would have been Spaceman from Pluto. Which, if you saw the Jack Black movie that came out last year, I believe, House of the Clock and Its Walls, there's a scene where they're pulling up to an old theater in a bus and playing on the marquee as a Spaceman from Pluto, which was a reference to Back to the Future. Boom. This is where one of the shots where they had the A car, the B car, and the C car. The C car was cut in half essentially, so that they could do those inside shots in the DeLorean. And now Marty's going to see the farmland. It's going to eventually be Lion Estates. Wow. It's a pretty shot, man. Hey, Bobby Z, you killed it on this movie. You did so good. I know you know that, but you did so good. Even the 1950s advertising that's not real. So good. They overreacted right there, for sure. Stop, we were dry. A recurring theme for Marty happens to him in Back to the Future 3. As soon as he gets to his past destination, DeLorean doesn't work anymore. Bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. There's a movie poster that has Ronald Reagan and Cattle of Queen Montana, starring Ronald Reagan, the actor. Mr. Foster Travel Service was still there in 1985. There was a shot of it in the distance on one of the little stores. It was still there in 1985. Travel agencies, though, not so popular now. Ballad of Davy Crockett, 16 Tons. Tennessee Ernie Ford. Classic record, man. Got 16 tons, what do you get? Hill Valley Stationers. There's the World War II monument in the middle of Hill Valley Square. It even looks like a Korean War memorial. Of course, politicians repeating the same lines for decades at a time, stealing each other's campaign phrases. Something that's still going on in this country today. November 5th, 1955. There's the Ballad of Davy Crockett playing on the jukebox. There's an Emerald Brown and an Elmer Brown in Hill Valley. Was that Marty's watch that was beeping? How do you get it to shut off so quickly? I can't get my Apple Watch to shut off like that when it's making noise. There's Billy Zane looking exactly like Drake. Billy Zane and Drake, the comparisons there are a little nuts. They've got to be related in the family tree somewhere. Billy Zane went on to do a movie about 11 years later called The Phantom with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Treat Williams. I love that movie. I know it is panned by a lot of critics. Love that movie. Oh, Goldie Wilson has a gold tooth though in 1955. But on the campaign poster in 85, like everything was black and white, but his tooth was colored in gold. Now, I don't know why Marty wanted to chase down his dad so bad, other than he's a familiar face in 1955. Here he is, being a peeping Tom. Now, was that Lorraine he was watching undress? I guess it was. And right there, where Michael J. Fox, look at that. His head bouncing off the concrete. I always wonder how he did that. Because that was a great sell. Great sell job, as we say in wrestling. Another one of these kids. I don't think I'd ever say my mom to my mother, "You're so hot," because he was definitely about to. And, meeting your parents in high school back in 1955, this is where the idea for the movie came from. The inspiration for Back to the Future largely stems from Bob Gale. And Bob Gale discovered his father's high school yearbook and was wondering whether he would have been friends with his dad as a teenager. Gale actually said if he had the chance to go back in time, he would really go back to see if they would be friends. And here comes Lorraine Baines' mother, Frances McCain is her real name. Someone I've been in correspondence with, trying to get her on the show as well. Hopefully we can do that. Now, we only heard ever after this of Joey and Lorraine. Used to these bars, kid. On the movie trivia competition, the movie trivia Schmodown, very popular YouTube series, one of the greatest players of that game is a guy named the Outlaw John Roca. And he famously missed a question about Back to the Future when it was asked, what name does Marty McFly go by in 1955? What name, what for, something about that, right? It had to do with underwear. It was like, what underwear brand does Marty McFly use as his name in 1955? That was a question. And John Roca did not know the answer, and he ended up saying Fruit of the Looms. Man from Space, of course, referencing what we just saw at the Peabody Forum. Great scene. That's really a great also commentary on how quickly somebody rises in the presidential conversation in this country. This is 1955. John F. Kennedy was elected 5 years later, which means he ran for president probably between, 3 and 4 years later. Nobody knew who he was, largely in the public consciousness. And then he became president. That's how politics work, man. Really was the same thing with Obama. People didn't really know Obama. Then all of a sudden he's president. My favorite line from Back to the Future right there. He's an idiot. It comes from upbringing. His parents are probably idiots too. I have that t-shirt for sale, by the way, on bradjgilmore.com if you want to get it. And here's the reveal of the Brown Mansion in 1955, also known as the Gamble House, real life place over in Burbank, California, I do believe. And I got a chance this time last year to go see the Gamble House in person. My girlfriend and I were in Los Angeles. We went over to see it. And it's like there's this weird little median that you have to turn into, and then there's a small street where you can park on the side of it, where the Gamble House is. And when you see it for the first time, it's pretty awe-inspiring because it's so iconic. To the Coast Guard Youth Auxiliary. Boom. you invented 1985. Chris Lloyd doesn't look all that younger in 1955. Ronald Reagan. On Reality of Wrestling, which is the wrestling show that I do the commentary for, we had a wrestler named Shawn Hendricks. And I was talking to him before the show about movies, and Back to the Future came up. And he told me that he had never seen Back to the Future ever in his life. I was thrown so far off by this, but I ended up telling him, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm gonna buy Back to the Future for you. I'm gonna send it to your house. And I did it right there on the spot. And I said, tonight in your match, I'm going to make at least a dozen Back to the Future references in your match. And then I want you to watch the match before, then watch the movie, and then watch the match back and see how many you pick up on. And he did. And I mean, it's very fun. I'll tweet that out as well. Here's a ginger ale for the working man. You know, I love that Doc is still trying to explain everything. Like 1955, Doc is still trying to figure out, what happens 30 years later. And he's even saying, the JVC, he's got to look good on TV, man. That's your president. But you know what? He's actually not too wrong about that. I watched this movie maybe 4 or 5 days ago with my girlfriend and her sister. And I haven't watched Back to the Future with somebody else in a really long time. I don't know if I've ever watched it with somebody else, to be honest with you. Maybe my dad when I was a kid, but you didn't realize until there's more than one person around. You know how, like, you never laugh to yourself? Like, if you're watching a comedy special on Netflix, you don't laugh to yourself. But when you're with other people, you tend to laugh more. And I didn't ever realize how funny Chris Lloyd is in this movie. He is so funny. And here's an internal scene of the Gamble House, or an internal look at the Gamble House, a house that I actually got to go to in L.A. I love how they put that flyer right in the frame, so you knew exactly what he was about to come up with. Harness. Wow, Michael J. Fox looks so young in Back to the Future 1. So one thing you don't really realize in the other movies, even though they pick up right where this one leaves off at the end, I mean, 4 years did a lot of aging to Michael J. Fox. He looks a lot different 4 years later. He looks more of a man than he does a boy, you know? I guess that's with everybody. I mean, in 4 years, I'm going to look a lot different than I do now. I'll be 30. And see, it could have been all so simple for Marty, but he had to bump into his folks, man. Erased from existence. Doc always knew exactly what was going on too quick. You know? He knew exactly, like, right when he saw Marty's brother's hand disappearing, he knows, oh, great Scott, he's been erased from existence. How do you even know to ask for the picture? This man's on another level. I'm telling you, he's on another level. Ron Woodward was running for senior class president. There's a trivia question for you. Oh. Oh. What a grade A loser. I mean, they did say Crispin Glover, I think he gets his credit for what he did in the movie. He is so good, though. He is on such another level. There's the Canadian coming out of Michael J. Fox. Sorry. I wonder what people in school actually thought about Calvin Klein. Because out of nowhere, this kid starts going to the school. He doesn't register. He's just walking the halls. 55 was it was a real Wild West, man. Oh, man, George just walking off barely. And, like, no one's worried about this old guy with gray hair walking around the hallways. Come on, Marty, man. You should have picked up on that one back when she was grabbing your leg at the dinner table. One of my favorite lines from Back to the Future is coming up here. He's trying to figure out how to set him up on a date, and here it is right here. What are the common entrance? Look. A rhythmic ceremonial ritual. This is another line that my girlfriend's sister, shout out to Seuss and I, shout out to Seuss. This is one of the ones that we laughed at the other night, man. It was so funny. A rhythmic ceremonial ritual. And here it goes, showing how father and son are alike. One thing about this movie that they do such a great job with is always setting up something and then paying it off. I think the forgotten element of Back to the Future is as follows. I think that people have forgotten about the pinheads. Think about it. We only hear reference to them really twice. Or 3 times. Strickland says, I know your band is trying out for, or you're auditioning for the talent show or whatever. Why even bother, McFly? And then we see them in the scene with Huey Lewis. And then we see him again. Hold on, I got distracted. So we hear him talk about the pinheads with Jennifer right after the audition. But the pinheads never come back up, do they? I mean, they come back up a little bit in part 2. That was the last time, Marty giving up on his music. So we don't hear a lot of the pinheads. And for something to be so, tied up nicely with a bow, what about the pinheads? Did they ever make it? Because George gets successful with his book that we'll find out. Did the pinheads ever make it? Make like a tree and get out of here. This movie has so many quotables, man. Oh, wow. I just noticed this. I never looked at that before. So if y'all just saw back in the last scene, the last closing seconds of the last scene, we saw George leave his tray of food on the table of the cafeteria. Had chocolate milk. Comes up again. Set up. And 3, 2, 1. Payoff here in a second. Mystery Science Theater. It's going through his mind. Beautiful house. I love the houses in the 1950s. Here we go. We're setting it up. He's a comic book reader. You see Fantastic Story. Marty already realizes that the Peabodys thought he was an alien. Why not play into it? Putting Eddie Van Halen in the Walkman. It's not a Sony Walkman, but, it's a Walkman. And I believe I read this somewhere, and I never got any real authentication if it was true, but I'm assuming that it is. This is actually original music from Eddie Van Halen that he gave for the movie. Now, I could be wrong about that. I read that before, though. And you know me, I don't have to source anything. I wonder how, the Star Wars fans and the Trekkies feel like Darth Vader being from the planet Vulcan in the Back to the Future pantheon. Nothing's coming to my mind.
Jesus, George, it was a wonder I was even born. What? Nothing. Look, tell her Destiny brought you together. Tell her that she's the most beautiful girl you've ever seen in the world. Girls like that stuff. What are you doing? I'm writing this down. This is good stuff. Yeah, okay. Oh, let's go. Oh, take care.
Set up the diner here that we're going to see is the aerobic studio. Look at Don Full of Love back there, just grooving. Wouldn't you love it if Goldie Wilson you were hanging out with Goldie. Goldie was just like, I'm grooving, man, in this thing. And there's the chocolate milk. I wonder what, I would love for Bob Gale to talk about what is the obsession with the chocolate milk with George McFly. I've never noticed that. In a million watchings of this film, I've never noticed that he only likes chocolate milk. I almost named the podcast this quote. I'm your density. And in this moment, Lorraine actually looks a little smitten with George. Am I crazy? She's like, oh yeah, I could see that. Oh. And once again, Billy Zane looks too much like Drake, man. Great shot. Now, Biff, a.k.a. Tom F. Wilson, claims that that moment right there where Marty decks him with the punch was actually Eric Stoltz. He said he only got punched in the face one time. And remember, they shot for 6 weeks. Depending on who you talk to. Some say 6, some say 8. But I've seen the most, it's 6 weeks with Eric Stoltz. So a lot of this they filmed and they used the inserts where they could. I mean, why reshoot something if you could use it? Also, one of the movie mistakes here is coming up. There aren't many in Back to the Future, but there is a slight movie mistake. As Marty is inventing skateboarding, you see Biff and his gang are going to get in Biff's, 47 Ford? And you'll see, you got to look close because it's literally about a second and a half. And if you want to go on YouTube, you can find the clip a little bit better. You have to have a keen eye. But at one point while Biff is driving, you see the stunt driver, not Biff. Is it right there? Was it right there? I think it's coming up. See the next time they flash to him. I think that it's right. Is it right here? Man, Marty really took those fools out. I think it's right here. Yeah, right there. Right there. You saw the stunt driver, not Biff. Got to really look for it. If you've never seen that before, it's worth stopping and being a little bit mind blown by it. And here we go. Perfect timing with the skateboard. D. Jones. Oh. Now, I know this is in 1955. I know. But I've spoken with my father, who was born in 45, my mother in 54. None of them seem to remember like manure trucks just randomly in downtown Houston. Just chilling. And there's George behind Lorraine again, walking away, just as we saw him do in the hallway of the school. God, this movie is so good. So good. All right, now remember this right here. Doc and Marty are getting into this skirmish, this quarrel, if you will, regarding no man should know too much about his own destiny. That's going to come back into play here toward the end of the movie. I actually was just reading a fan theory by a Reddit user about Doc that kind of made me change my tune on this a little bit that I actually want to dive into in another episode. But and I never knew, as much as I love every time he does this, and we got this scene, and then we got it again in Back to the Future 3. I didn't think that it was ever necessary, but I enjoyed both of them. Like the model, like why did he have to make the model? You know what I mean? Especially if it's not to scale. Like what's the point? Please forgive the crudity of this model. But it's a great scene. It's a classic scene. You're about to have one of the great Chris Lloyd reactions here in about 2 seconds or 10 seconds. Great timing. Now, for those of you who have never played the video game, the set comes back to play in the video game, the model, if you will. I don't want to spoil it or ruin anything for y'all who haven't seen the game footage. Marty knows when he tells Doc, though, if George asked Lorraine out, he knows that he didn't. So I don't know why he is acting as if he was successful. No one was put off by this? Like, I know Marty and Doc are in on it, but I didn't really realize how creepy Lorraine was in 1955 when I would watch this movie when I was younger, man. Really, I didn't realize how creepy she was until right now. I thought it was weird too that she said, "Oh, George McFly, he's kind of cute." Would you really tell somebody that you're trying to ask out on a date that another person was cute? That doesn't work for men, at least. It might work for women. Men were like, "I don't care." Yeah, there are a lot of I don't care if she thinks he's cute. She's looking at me. But if I were to try to tell a woman, and I'm not trying to make any things here, but if I were to tell my girlfriend, when I was asking her out on a date, "Oh yeah, your friend's kind of cute, but I'm really looking at you," I don't think that would have played so well. Marty really had to go, like, really want to go back to the future. I know that sounds stupid, but he really had to want to go back to the future in order, so bad that he would hatch a plan to fondle and molest his own mother, because that's what's happening here. In order to have, his parents end up falling in love. My man Michael J. Love him. I love how the son's teaching the father what the father taught the son. You know what I mean? I hear that. You know, when I was watching this movie again the other day, when Marty said that line about the weatherman, it made me think of the Curb Your Enthusiasm episode with Larry David. All you Curb fans know about his quandaries with the weatherman. And now we see Marty writing the letter. And there's another one of those movie mistakes that's going to pay off here in a minute. Marty, in the letter, you see there's going to be a shot here in any second of him signing the letter, your friend Marty. Look at the handwriting. Cop taking a payoff. Get it out there, brother. Marty slipping in the do not open to 1985 letter. The thing that I don't understand about Doc in this movie is, okay, so he's so concerned about not knowing, having information about the future. I guess technically if he had that envelope in his possession, he would know information about the future or have information about the future. But if he doesn't open it until 1985, I don't really see what the big deal is. Like, open it the day of. You know when Marty's going back. You put it in the time circuits for 85. I don't know why he can't just, you know what I mean? Like, why can't he open it the day that Marty goes back? Then you're not really altering history too much. The only thing you know is you're going to live. It's not a bad thing to know. You know what I mean? This is when Lorraine's previous statements, when they were first sitting at the dinner table in the opening parts of the movie, she goes against all of them. And remember, she goes, I never called a boy. I never chased a boy. Okay, you didn't call him in the movie, but you definitely chased him. I never sat in a parked car with a boy. He's got to down that liquor, brother. I really, there's always the talks about the reboot of Back to the Future. If they did it, I'm not 100% opposed to it, but I just don't recast Marty and Doc. Make it about new people because no one can play those characters. No one can play those characters like Michael J. Fox and Chris Lloyd. Maybe give them little cameos. Gotta say, Lorraine's looking good. this is actually disturbing. And upcoming is right here. Her reaction and the upcoming line is what Bob Zemeckis, the director of the movie, obviously, this is what he says is his favorite line in the film. Look at Michael J. Fox. When I kiss you, it's like I'm kissing my brother. That was Robert Zemeckis' line. Sorry, I got caught up in the movie. Now, what's great about what they did with Back to the Future 2 is that you realize that Biff, you're right here, Biff is drunk, right? But you never see him really drinking. But you see him do it in Back to the Future 2. Like they set that up. I have to look up my 1955 vernacular. Who you calling Scoop? Spook? Starlighters are about that business. There's Harry Waters Jr., who was on the last season of Back to the Future, the podcast. Now, George thinks everything's going according to plan. Look at him. He's walking confidently, opens the door. Hey, you, get your damn hands off her. Now, what provokes George here? Because there's really no real reason for him to stay. I mean, I guess there is a huge reason because Biff's attempting, you know what, to Lorraine. But all of a sudden, right there, he stands up to Biff. You got to think that it was the help of Marty giving him confidence. Sloppy right hand thrown. I always loved the sound that Crispin Glover made right here, too. Ah, 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 ah. Look at this. Now, Biff has plenty of time to duck this punch, but just clobbered him. Did a 720, it looked like. Knocked him flat out. And look at him, look at his hand. Looking like Booker T about to do the spin-a-rooney. These are the people I'd like to talk to, though, on the show. These folks who had like one or two lines, just to know what their experience was like, because I'm sure no one's ever asked them before. The guy who just said, that's George McFly. I think part of what makes Chris Lloyd so good is just the voice. He's got such a distinct, unusual sounding voice. You know what? I'm a moron. I was talking about how this. Now, we still don't hear from the Pinheads, but the music is picked up again here. One of my favorite songs of all time. Now, this is another thing I don't understand is George just stood up to the biggest bully in school, right? Biff Tannen, the biggest bully in Hill Valley High. And then some redheaded dude comes over and is like, scram, McFly. And he can't stand up to him instantly. He has to kind of walk away. And this guy and why can't Lorraine just slap this dude? I have so many questions at this scene. Some okay aging effects there. This guy's not even dancing. Dude, man, men suck. Men really suck. And then here we go. Whew. Kiss her, George. And Marty has his hand back. Everyone's back in existence. Wow. Another moment just clicked in my head. You know, Marty was supposed to play at his high school with his band, got rejected, so he can't pass up the opportunity to play at his high school in front of an audience with a band. Now, Michael J. Fox isn't playing the guitar here, and I don't believe he's singing either, although it somewhat sounds like him. He's not playing the guitar, but he really learned where his fingers should be so that he could look like it. Also, when I was a kid, I used to think that this was an impossible thing. Like, here's a song they've never heard, the band, and just based on his riff, they can pick it up and start playing. Until I started doing club scenes and hanging around with a lot of bands. Like, guys who are that talented, they exist. And you can just say, hey, I want to have have you ever heard, like, I remember I wanted to do Just a Friend one time, and I was like, have you ever heard Just a Friend by Biz Markie? And none of them had it. I don't know how that was even possible. None of them had it. And I kind of was like, it's like, I kind of hummed what, da 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 da, and they all picked up on it. They knew exactly how to do it, and we got to perform it in front of the band. Marvin Berry calling his cousin Chuck Berry, who would then go and sing this song, Johnny B. Good. And a lot of people say that he invented rock and roll. Some say Elvis did. There's a debate here, but many people say Chuck Berry invented rock and roll. And it's kind of funny. There are a lot of issues with Back to the Future. If it came out in 2019, right? White dude appropriating the music, right? Kind of whitewashing history a little bit. There's the Oedipus complex. There's the attempted, for lack of a better term, rape of Lorraine by Biff. A lot of issues here. But we look past them all because we love the film. And to me, they don't bother me. And they're also the 1980s. So, you got to look at it back then. I understand that it's a part of the story. And, I'm not going to take offense to anything. But, if it came out now, that would be the hashtag, and all the whatever, that'd be the problem. So, how did they know that he was leaving? Did I miss something? Will I ever see you again, Marty? Thanks for your advice. They're saying it like I know you're heading out. Maybe I missed a line. That was another thing that I always thought about is when he said, if your 8-year-old, one day when you have kids, if your 8-year-old sets fire to the living room rug, go easy on him. When that actually ended up happening in whatever that would have been, 1975 or 1976, whenever that happened, were they not like, hey, you remember that Calvin Klein dude? He said that was going to happen. Hey, Doc's car back there is sweet. All right, here's my theory. Okay, right there. So where Doc says, Marty says, Biff never, he never stood up to Biff a day in his life. And then Doc says, never. And then Marty's like, yeah, what's the matter? No, nothing. And then they get back to the rest of the movie. I used to think that was kind of just a dropped line. And this is something that I read the other day. They said that, think about it. Was that the moment that Doc had an epiphany about time travel? He was so worried about knowing future information and altering something in 1955 that would then backfire in 1985. This is what his main concern was, right? In this movie, at least. Was it then that Doc realized that, hey, just because you screw something up and don't do it the exact right way time wanted you to do it, things would still turn out okay. Even though they might be different, everything still turned out for the best. Because, we know that since George punched Biff, when you got back to 1985, he was an author. He had a better house, better cars, more money, and fit, happier, right? Is that when Doc realized it could still have good repercussions on the future? Because he saw Marty's family all come back. The boys and the girls, they all came back. Even though it wasn't the exact way it was supposed to. Is that why Doc taped up the letter? Because you see him with the letter in his hand right now. And he tears up the letter. But after he do that, did he think about, wait a minute, everything worked out okay. All the kids were still born even after George stood up to Biff. Is it okay to have this information? I hope I explained that right. There's a forum out about it. Just type in Doc fan theory. It should come up. And I think this is part of the irony of the Back to the Future trilogy. They always are cutting things down to the very last second, right? It's always the last second when their plan finally all comes together. or they're just a few seconds or off. If you think about the climax or the end of Back to the Future Part 3, and you think about this one, I think that's the irony of the series. Is they have a time machine, but they're always short on time. And now Doc looking here, scared by the cat. Those were from some movie, I think, called like The Cat People or something from the 40s or something like that. But I love that there's actually twin sets of iconic cats in this movie, right? You think about the clock tower cats right there that we see, and you also think about the Lion Estate, the two lions, the two cats sitting on top of Lion Estates, marrying one another. That doesn't mean anything, but I've always found it interesting. Or maybe it does. Does it mean something? I don't know. Did they really think that? Did Marty really think that was going to work? Doc is up like at least 50 feet. He's the best. All right, they got less than 4 minutes. I'm going to count this right now. So that's an hour 42:30. So let's see what happens. To be an hour 40:30 on the movie clock. I'm looking at my runtime on this commentary. Stiff ledge, man. They were really on a hope and a prayer, too, that this thing was going to work. There's another trivia question for you. Bluebird Motel. "10 minutes ought to do it." You can go back early and warn him, and you do it with only 10 minutes? What are you going to do in 10 minutes? Marty, I know you're 17 in the movie. What are you going to do in 10 minutes? You know what I mean? Why don't you go like an hour? This is something that I think makes this ending climax so great, though, is that there's so many small things that keep messing up. Like Marty got there late because he had to do the Johnny Be Good. Then the cable comes unplugged, so Doc's got to be up there and do it. Then he almost falls off of the cliff, slips and falls. The cable barely catches his pant leg, of all things. Sweet pant leg, by the way. Sweet pants. Catches his pant leg of all things. Somehow he survives that. And then Marty's car won't start. The DeLorean won't start. Go, Marty. Wow, I still get into this thing. Now, famously, the clock tower scene, one of the most iconic parts of the entire movie. It's the only scene, though, that appears in all three films. At some point or another, this scene appears in Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. Obviously it appears in 1, but 2 and 3. Oh, here we go. Boom. Unplugs it again. How they pull this all off, I'll never know. This is when George says it's his density. This was their density. This was absolutely their density. Everything had to go right perfectly in order for this to happen. And Doc's he's about to risk it all. This is a leap of faith if I've ever seen one. And we're hitting 88. Time circuits are starting to come together. I mean, it's the very last second. Marty sees Doc. Is he going to make it? Whew. And I always love this effect right here, that little flame on the top of the wire. After you think it's all gone, this. Always love that. What a beautiful, just wide shot right there. And this is how they show you that they're in 1985, because there's a police helicopter, because the 80s are dangerous. Some Rick Astley there. Now this drunk pedestrian, for those of you who still don't know, there's the Statler Toyota. The guy who said crazy drunk driver, this homeless pedestrian, is actually Mayor Red Thomas from 1955. You notice Marty calls him Red. And the car doesn't work. This is why you don't go only 10 minutes earlier, Marty. And here come the Libyans. A couple of jokes are going to pay off here in a minute. I just love that Marty is able to run to the mall. Full speed. I was about to say barely out of breath, but he's definitely dying. And there's Lone Pine Mall. It's a joke. And then he's just too late. I love the alternate angle here. This is one of the things that Back to the Future did so well, is being able to show you a scene that you've already seen before from a different perspective. Marty's just like, I can't run down this hill. Might as well roll. I'm telling you. You find something new in this movie every time you watch it. There you go. And I always wonder what happened to the Libyans. Oh, they crashed into a 1-hour photo stand. Apparently that was enough to disrupt them for the rest of their lives, because we never heard from the Libyans again. Chris Lloyd doing a great sell job right here. As we would say in wrestling. In wrestling, when someone's getting beat up, they're selling it, right? They're not really getting beat up. Great sell job. Marty's sad. He's like, why didn't I come back earlier? And then he sees Doc rise up like The Undertaker, speaking of wrestling. And Doc looks confused. I never got why he looked so confused that he had a bulletproof vest on. I just developed a new fan theory. There's always been the question, why are Doc and Marty friends? Why are they friends? Why are they friends? Maybe because Doc had that letter for 30 years. He knew he was always going to meet Marty eventually, so he became friends with him early on because he knew Marty's going to be the guy to save his life. I don't know. Just came up with that off the top. They said, what the hell? And you saw the letter there. It was different handwriting than it was earlier at Lou's Cafe. And Doc saying, what the hell, goes back to the other theory that I just had about he realized that you can still have information about the future or alter the future and it be in a positive way and not have a negative impact on the timeline. I love that back in time is the alarm that wakes him up. Now, you got to think, Michael J. Fox has fallen asleep in the same position twice in this movie. I don't know if this is a thing that he does. That is the most uncomfortable looking position to sleep in. Why is one arm under him and one arm over him? I think he's looking around like it was just a dream. Or a nightmare. Until he sees the living room. Wendy Jo Sperber and Mark McClure. Linda and Dave. Now, famously, Crispin Glover has a big issue with the ending of this movie. He thought that the fact that they have better jobs, there's better clothing, they have better cars, they have more money, they're in better health and shape. He thought this was a negative message to send everybody. It's a very 80s ending is what Robert Zemeckis called it, but Crispin Glover apparently argued with people on set saying, I don't think this is a good ending for the movie. You're even showing, Biff being an auto detailer. It's almost looked at it like in a negative thing, like it's not honest work. So he was really against this ending. Thought it showed money is equal to happiness, even though we all know it isn't. Once again, the underappreciated Thomas F. Wilson. I counted the other day. Biff, if you include Griff and Mad Dog Tannen, there are 7 different variations of the Biff character we see throughout the Back to the Future series. 7. There's original 85 Biff. There's 55 Biff. Then there is alternate. Well, no, okay, so there's original 85 Biff, 55 Biff. Then there's the alternate Biff that we're seeing now. And then there's Old Man Biff, Griff, the Donald Trump 1985. That's what Bob Gale calls him. In Biff Horrific period. And then Mad Dog Tannen. That's 7 different variations of Biff. Here's the gorgeous Claudia Wells. And of course, this is the scene that also opens Back to the Future 2, but they had to reshoot it with Elizabeth Shue. There's one noticeable difference, aside from a different girl, when they reshoot it, is that when Marty goes, what do we become, assholes or something? Doc, no. He kind of pauses for a second. That's in Back to the Future 2. He doesn't do it in Back to the Future 1. And Bob Gale always said, of course y'all had this, there was going to be sequels. He said people always say that. Look how you ended the first movie. Of course there's going to be a sequel. But this was just supposed to be a joke. They did not plan on any other movies to this. This wasn't like today where you have the Avengers franchise where you're going to have a dozen or 20 or 24 movies. This was just going to be a one-off movie. They didn't know if it was going to be a hit. So this is a joke. See, no pause there. I'll be honest with you. Doc ages beautifully. He looks the same in 55 and in 85. One of the most iconic lines in movie history. And we see the flying DeLorean. And there we go. That was Back to the Future Part 1. That was my commentary. I hope it wasn't too annoying to hear me talk throughout the entirety of the film. But it's something that I always wanted to do. And this wasn't supposed to be super in-depth and analytical. These were just my thoughts. This is what goes through my head every time I watch this movie. I appreciate y'all for listening to this edition of Back to the Future, the podcast. We're going to be back here very soon, maybe as soon as next week with brand new episodes. I've already planned out the rest of season 5. I've already started on 6 and 7. So the podcast is going to be around for a very long time. Got a lot of interesting things set up for all you pinheads out there. So until next time, I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore. And we'll see you in the future.